talk to you. So, um, question number one,
Sure.
when did you begin your work in the field of trauma and suspension rates? Well, like, when did it all start?
So those two variables are different answers. I got into the field of social work in 2011. In my first really two positions, I was working concurrently. One was in a nonprofit with an agency that was primarily a housing agency, and we provided temporary, emergency, and long-term permanent supportive housing to individuals who were both chronically homeless and who were suffering from HIV/AIDS. I was also at that time working at an inpatient psychiatric hospital for 6-year-old to 12-year-old kids who had severe behavioral problems.
Mm.
They would stay with us for about 6 months to a year. So through both those jobs, though I wasn't explicitly studying it yet, that was my first real true exposure to working with people with, severe histories of trauma. In 2016, I began a role with the school district with Greenville County Schools as an attendance supervisor. You may know that as a truancy officer. It was a non-traditional social work job, and I took it as a challenge. And I did that position for about 2 years. And that was my first role where I was really looking deeply at the attendance of students, and I was able to see kind of how that could play out if, through the school to prison pipeline, if students were and parents were began to send to family court and get, actual punitive sanctions like that, and how that could actually affect their lives. So I'd say 2011 and 2016 independently.
Wow, that's a great experience on kind of on both different levels, in schools and out of schools.
Yeah.
Um, so the TED Talk you had, it was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, it spoke to me. It spoke to several of my classmates. Just really amazing. Um, in your opinion, why are there not more conversations about trauma and in education?
I think with most of the things that I think that we'll probably end up talking about, I don't think there's just one answer to that. In my experience, one thing is in education, we are still in a lot of ways stuck in an archaic system of beliefs that is very punitive in nature. And I really don't understand. I heard somebody the other day make the statement, in education, we're always trying to be on the forefront of things in the way we teach math, the way we teach science, the way we teach English. But the way we work around student behavior and discipline is still, is older than either one of us.
Mhm.
And it's punitive, and it's what happened, and let's go to this matrix and figure out what punishments deserve without actually looking at what harm was done. What is the individual situation? Let's look at the circumstances involving the actual person in this situation. I feel like, in my experience, some of the hard part of getting people to come at looking at student behavior and student achievement through the lens of a trauma-informed approach is, I think when people hear that, sometimes they think, oh, that means that we should let students do whatever they want. We should excuse everything. We should not hold students to high expectations and to high standards. And in truth, it's anything but that. It's quite the opposite. But it's just instead looking at things through a compassionate lens. I think that's, in my experience, that's one of the hardest things is to let go of the fact that maybe I'm always right and I know everything that's going on.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's just the fact of the matter is we live in the gray, and we don't know just like I don't know what you brought into this interview. You don't know what I dealt with this morning. It's the same thing with our students. We don't know what they're bringing into the classroom. We don't know what our staff's bringing in
Right.
to the schoolhouse every day. So, but it's difficult, and it's a lens. I mean, it's a needle that we're still trying to move. I feel like I'm dancing around your question, but at the end of the day, I don't know, other than just like letting go of that idea that I know what's going on with the student and they should be doing X, Y, Z. But I will say this: I don't always like to sound like a negative person. I do feel like I can speak for Greenville County Schools. I feel like we are very much moving closer to that direction. We are having those conversations both at a school level and at a district level. So sometimes I wish it would go quicker. That's just my nature.
Mhm.
But I think we're starting to have those conversations.
Wow, that's good. Um, how much impact does student trauma you feel have on the success of a student? How big would you weigh it?
I think it can have all the impact. And I want to make a distinction too. We talk about trauma a lot now, and I think we need to make sure that we always remember that there's like trauma and there's chronic stress, and our students are experiencing both. But I think if we ignore those things and we don't make a intentional and explicit effort to put protective factors in these students' lives as much as we can, and to help them build resilience and not just ignore it. Um, I think it can make or break students' lives, especially if that student has experienced significant trauma or significant chronic stress, but then also does not have those protective factors at home or in their community or in somewhere outside of that school. Um, we can make a big difference, but I think it's naive to think that it cannot affect a student's ability to achieve in school and out and in life. Period.
Wow. Um, how much? Why do you feel, or do you have an opinion or have a theory on why you think field suspension rates, at least in California, we're finding that suspension rates are higher for students of color? Um, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, and it's not just California. That's across the nation. It is definitely true in the state of South Carolina. It's true in our district, and we are having that conversation, and we're trying to put great, smart minds at the table to figure out why and how do we turn that around. Um, I have a lot of opinions on that. There's a gentleman that I just recently saw, Dr. Rashad Anderson. He works for where is it? It might be SC State, but he's down in Columbia. I would encourage you to look him up too. He just wrote a book called, and I apologize if I mess it up, but I think it's Why Are All the Black Boys Sitting in the Principal's Office?
Mm,
And he did a qualitative study on this issue. And what he talked about in his talk, and it's not a TED talk, but I heard him talk, was at third grade was kind of the point in time where they've identified that specifically young black boys kind of make a decision, is school for me,
third grade.
at third grade. And I guess I have the privilege to look at, like, if I see a student in sixth, seventh grade, and eighth grade starting to have tremendous difficulties being engaged or, high suspension rates, I'll look back, when did this start? And quite often at kindergarten, first, second grade, those kids are already starting to be suspended at a very high rate, not just in school, but out of school suspensions. And I think sometimes we don't talk a lot enough about what that does psychologically to somebody.
Mhm.
Because if you look at things, we are tribal by nature. And if we look at school like a family, if you suspend me as a second grader and you tell me that you're not good enough to be here, or what you did is too bad to be here, then you're at home for 10 days. Not only are you academically falling far behind in those 10 days, but you feel isolated. You feel rejected from that community. And we also do not do a great job of reintegrating that student back into the fold, into the family when they come back.
Mhm.
And I think, there's people that say, well, that's not our job. And maybe it's not our job, but the fact is it's not getting us where we want to go. So maybe we need to make it our job. So you can look at that from an academic lens and just a familial psychological lens. And I think that early on is when we start to intentionally or unintentionally push certain students away. Now, if you take that conversation and look at it through a trauma informed lens, we know that generational trauma exists. We are not that far removed from institutions of slavery and Jim Crow laws. And the African American community has historically been, outcast in this community and has been in this country, I should say, and has been oppressed. So if you look at that and take epigenetics, for example, and look at how that trauma could have been passed from two generations down to one generation to the kids that we're serving in school right now. If you consider that some of those early behaviors of the kids that we just talked about that are getting suspended early on in school could be trauma related, then some of those behaviors that were developed as like a all right, let's break it down to one student. If you've got a student who's dealing with, gene expression through a trauma lens from generation, or maybe they just live at home with an abusive dad, however you want to look at it. If they are developing survival skills based on that trauma, when that trauma exposes itself in a school setting, we have a problem, because those behaviors are probably not going to look survival in school. It's going to look like, cussing out a teacher or shutting down. If we look at that for just what it is and we suspend that student, then that's how we're playing a role in those higher rates. And I believe that that's the big picture. On a smaller picture, if you look at it, I don't know if you're familiar with the implicit bias test that Harvard did. So looking at it through that lens, I think we also have to just acknowledge that not just white educators, but all educators, according to that Harvard test, have a preference towards white male. And I think that plays out directly in our suspension rates and our expulsion rates, our referral rates. And if we don't have hard conversations and do things intentionally to try to make sure we have systems in place to combat those biases, nothing's going to change with those rates.
Wow. Man, that was beautiful. In your opinion, you mentioned some of it in your TED talk. If you could just share what you found successful. Are there effective alternatives to off-campus suspensions? And just want to add this little piece on a personal level. I'm a dean of students responsible for discipline on my campus, and I'm searching for alternatives. I think we all are. But are there alternatives that can satisfy the teacher mob? Because, I have what's good, best for the student, what are school expectations and rules.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have the teacher mob that's like, you didn't dig in enough. You're going soft on these kids. And if you could speak to any alternatives that you found to be successful.
And, I think that's fair. A lot of times we put too much on our teachers, and I'm a huge proponent of restorative practices. And that's what I'm about to talk about. And one of the things that restorative practice is built on is something called the social discipline window. And if you can imagine like an XY axis, it goes from what it does is it looks at what is the level of support that you're giving in this action, and what is the level of expectations that you're having in this action. And if you go too high in expectation but low in support, then you're doing something to someone. But if you're high in support and you're high in expectation, then you're doing it with them. Now, that's only talking about half of this axis. But the reason I say that is I feel like a lot of times, and I'm part of this problem, is when we come in from a district level decision-making point of view and we implement these new programs, whatever it be, we do those things to teachers a lot of times and not with them. And then they don't even know what's the purpose for this, how is it really supposed to be executed with fidelity, and then it doesn't work. And then what does that mean? Then another year or two down the road, we're doing something new, and we're doing it to them. They're never included in the decision-making process and the true rollout. And restorative practices would say you want to do that with them. Now, if we look at the student discipline side through that same lens, if we do something to a student, that would be our traditional punitive model. All right, well, 10 kids on paper did the same thing. They were caught with, let's say you had 10 kids caught with a weapon at school. Then all of them, according to our punitive model, they're going to get the exact same, suspension. Well, if you flip that coin to the far too lenient side, and if we end up going to deference, then you can go to the bottom of that same axis that we're talking about and do something for someone. That would be high control, no expectations. That means, 10 kids got caught with something. Poor kids, poor Johnny. I know, home life, sorry. Just go on back to class. That's not good either. So if you do something with someone, that means if you have those 10 kids that are doing that, you're going to ask. So restorative practices uses questions like, let's sit down and actually look, what harm was done? What happened here? Who was affected? And most importantly, going back to that original conversation we were having about bringing a student back into the fold, What needs to happen to make things right, to heal this relationship? Now, sometimes, and it takes a lot of work, but what that does is it truly looks at the situation, what's going on. It treats everybody in the situation like a human being with a voice. Everybody gets to be heard, and you're making amends. So sometimes that might look like a student doing community service in the school. Sometimes that might look like a hard conversation between a student and a teacher where one of those people makes an apology or both of those people make an apology. But you're actually looking at the root of what is going on. And the goal is to not just, slap somebody on the hand and shame them, but to fix that and fix the relationship so everybody can feel safe and supported going forward. And it's been shown to reduce repeat behaviors, which is the goal, right? Because right now, the way we do things, it's not working. If it worked, a kid would do something once, they'd be suspended, and they wouldn't do that again. But that's not what we see. I don't know if that answered your question. I feel like
Man,
I.
yes, you did. You're nailing it. Like you got it going. Um,
And can I add something to that?
yes, sir.
One thing I believe we miss. So when we talk about discipline, Becky Bailey she founded a program a long time ago called Conscious Discipline that I don't have any affiliation with them, but I think it's outstanding, outstanding classroom management program that starts with self-regulation of the adult. But she made a statement, and I love it. She said, discipline is not something we do to a child. It is something we develop in a child. And what I love about true restorative practice of work in a school setting is only about 20% of that work is going to be something that you do after an offense has occurred. So about 80% of that work is very proactive. It's like community building circles in a classroom. It's relationship building on purpose, and it's getting to know each other. So it's the staff getting to know the teachers and vice versa before anything happens. And to me, that is the power of breaking down these suspension disparity numbers regarding race and special ed and things like that, because you get to know someone for who they are, not who they appear to be. And I've looked at a lot of schools, I read a lot of articles on this, and some schools want to just adopt the tertiary or the reactive piece of restorative practice. Now, when they do that, their suspension numbers and discipline numbers go down, they decrease, but there's no close in the racial gap. When schools adopt it as a whole school model and teachers are doing this in the classroom, then you see both. You see numbers drop, but you also see that racial gap drop, and you see equity built within the discipline model. So I wanted to make sure I touched on that.
Man, that literally, I'm so glad you touched on it because I was gonna try to sneak in one extra question and find out if you could elaborate on when you said in your TED talk, discipline is something you teach, not what you do. So you're right on. You read my mind.
In brain science, man, brain science is the reason that we say that, because if you like right now, I am learning to speak Spanish. I'm 40 years old, man. I'm learning to speak Spanish. I started when I was probably 38. It's hard, man. It's hard, and I've had to realize I'm never going to sound like a native, and I have to put a lot of work. If you take a 2-year-old and you're speaking Spanish in the house, they're going to pick up on that quick. They're going to form specific synaptic connections for those sounds, for those words. And even if they spend their adolescence not speaking Spanish, they're going to come to it and still have those sounds that I don't have. And they're going to be able to learn a lot quicker. You've heard throw a baby in the water and they'll learn how to swim quicker than an adult. And that's the way synapses work. So, but the thing is like, if we teach a kid algebra, right? If a kid, you've heard about the reading gap. So if a kid grows up hearing reading in the house, parents reading to them, they're going to come in with a whole lot more vocabulary than a student that grew up without reading in the house. We understand that now. We understand that a student who comes in behind the 8 ball on reading, we have to give them extra support. We know that we can't give them like a 2-hour lesson and expect them to catch up with those other kids. We do not treat discipline that way. We do not treat social emotional learning and just basic, human skills that we want kids to have that way. If you have a student who's grown up in a house with no discipline the way we would define it, being able to act however they want, and then they show up at 5, 6 years old in our school system, I don't understand why we think that we can just tell them one time, well, that's not the way we do things in this class. We sit, with our backs on the chair and our butts in the seat one time, and then they're just going to,
Right.
we know the science does not support that. It takes, and the older a kid gets, the more lessons it takes. You have to build those connections. It doesn't happen in one time. But I think that's the key to that is that if you want a student to, demonstrate XYZ behavior, we may have to swallow our pride and realize we have to teach them that over a consistent period of time and look for progress. Are they getting better in that skill, but not necessarily overnight perfection, and then punish them when they're not perfect. Now I'm on a soapbox, but it just doesn't, like science doesn't support, doing things that way.
Brain science. That's real. That's real. Um, well, I know my classmates are going to be into everything you're saying. You're really, I think you're at the top of the field as for where we need to go. That's my opinion. And so, can you tell us any places you will be speaking if you're working on any projects, any books, or anything, so my classmates can kind of follow you? If you have social media or whatever we can do to stay in touch and kind of follow what you're researching, what you're doing.
Right now, probably the best way. I wish I could write. I wish I had time to write a book. The key to that, bro, is like writing is my first love, but I always try to keep myself grounded. And I want to, if I get to the point where I want to write a book, I want to write a book because I have something to say. I don't want to write it just to say something, if that makes sense. I don't want to write a book on something that's already been said if somebody's done it well. But maybe one day, maybe one day. But right now, I would say just, catch me on Twitter or LinkedIn at TJ Rum. If I'm doing anything, you'll find it on there.
Okay.
Right now, most of my speaking is with the schools in the upstate with Greenville County. And I've started to do some stuff with different districts in Spartanburg. I think I'm going down to Richland to do some stuff maybe next year. I'm waiting on the actual dates. But I'm open to come. Some of the things I like to talk about. I love to talk about restorative practices because I think it could be the key of equity shift in schools in this country. I'm a huge proponent of mindfulness. It's made a difference. Mindfulness and yoga and meditation have made a huge, huge difference in my life. So that's something I always love to come and talk about. If I can ever just, help you out in any way, even another one of these little chats or something like that. I'm about the work, man, and it's about the we, not me. So whatever I can do to help you, help our state and help our kids, man, I'm on board.
Wow. Well, man, just thank you so much for making time. I will definitely be following up with you to just let you know how jazzed up my classmates were, and just continue your great work. I was blown away. Um, so excited to finally get a chance to talk to you, and I hope you do write a book because you actually are. Not only are you able to present the content, but your delivery of it is very digestible. And I
Thank you.
think a lot of times you can have the best content in the world, but the delivery or whatever who it comes from is not as impactful. So I think you've been gifted with that, and so I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Can I make an ask of y'all?
Yes, sir.
Since y'all are down in Columbia, man, I know you probably rub elbows with a lot of our state legislators.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm at USC in California.
Oh,
Yes.
I was thinking I was thinking USC Columbia this whole time,
No,
man.
that's why I was like, no, I'm in USC in California.
Oh, snap. Oh,
Yes.
made it. That's why you said California earlier. That's why
Yeah.
you were specific about that.
Yeah.
Oh, what I'll be
Yeah.
doggone. Okay. Well,
So
go,
there are two
go, go
USCs, right?
Trojans.
But no, we all the way in California, your work is, I mean, what you're saying is huge. And so I really we're on big time onto urban leadership and equity.
Okay.
So I think you're one of the best. And so
Thank you.
I want to make sure that you're in our class conversations. And
Thank
I assume that you go to conferences. If you're not, I think
you. Yeah.
you should
Oh,
be
yeah.
at conferences nationwide because of what you're saying.
So if I could ever come out and work with y'all, let me know. I've never been to that part of California, so I'd love to check it out.
Well, yes, we definitely will. We'll try to make that happen. for sure. So
All
thank
right,
you
man.
so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day at work, and I will follow up with you.
Thank you. See you on
Okay.
the social media.
All right. Take care.
Bye.